Hello, and thank you for joining us. Today's webinar is Enclosures for the Teledyne CETAC ASX Series Autosampler. Our presentation today is by Fred Smith, Product Technical Manager at Teledyne CETAC. Okay, Fred, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you.
Okay, thank you for the introduction, Shelley, and thank you everyone for attending today. Today we're going to have an overview of the enclosures that are available for the ASX Series Autosamplers, and also mention, of course, that these enclosures could be used for other devices in your lab or other model autosamplers. So the enclosures that we will discuss today, the main ones, were developed with the top three autosamplers listed in mind. The ASX 500 series, the current model being the 560, which is a 4-rack autosampler. The ASX 280, which is a 2-rack autosampler. And the Accelerate 860, which is a larger 8-rack autosampler for high sample loads. And enclosures are available specifically for these autosampler types and other ones that are similar to it. And later in the presentation, we will show you some compatibility tables that can help you choose which enclosure may be best for the setup you have. So a quick review of the ASX series autosamplers, the 560, 280, and 860. They already come with a polymer cover, base, and sample tray, carbon fiber arm and Z drive, no exposed metal parts. They all have a flowing rinse station that's supplied with a peristaltic pump. The rinse station, of course, is made of inert materials. There are standard positions. The usual setup is for 1050 ml polypropylene vials and a 0.5 millimeter inert carbon fiber supported sample probe as standard. So a lot of the details in the design is with corrosion resistance in mind, and also to minimize trace element contamination. Okay. So a review of what those autosamplers do look like. Here is the 2-rack ASX 280 system, and it's just showing 2 racks with 21 each 50 ml polypropylene vials, but as I'll show you, you can mix and match different racks as needed. There is the ASX 560, the 4-rack autosampler. Of course, its tray simply about doubles that of the 280. And the largest system, the Accelerate 860, with up to 8 racks. This one actually has a moving back XYZ head that moves along the axis of the tray. So with that quick review of the autosampler models, okay, there are the variety of different sample vial racks that you can choose, and volume of vials depending upon the sample sequence you want to run. Here is the family of enclosures that are developed, specifically with those 3 type of autosamplers in mind. So the smaller unit is what's called the ENC for Enclosure 280 DC, DC standing for dust cover. The ENC 560 DC, again, DC standing for dust cover, and the ENC 860, which of course is the largest of the 3 enclosures that are available. You'll see some details in this one picture, and we'll go into that in more depth. You'll see the red plugs that cover ports. Those are that you can use to plug the enclosure and then add a fan to direct airflow through. So there are options of fans and HEPA filters as you outfit the enclosure specifically for the autosampler setup you want to have in your laboratory. So the benefits of the enclosures, of course, you can protect personnel from hazardous samples. A lot of these samples will be corrosive, as they'll be in strong inorganic acids. So that, of course, is a very high benefit of using the enclosures. You can prevent sample contamination by covering the sample tray and helping to prevent contamination from the outside laboratory atmosphere entering the samples. The construction of the frame of these enclosures are made of shatterproof polycarbonate. As you saw in the previous picture, there are multiple ports for putting in tubing, power cords, and communication cables. Also, there are ports, as you saw, to attach a vent port, fan, and filter options. As we'll see a little bit later, the access to the samples and the Autosampler components are very easy. There are both sliding front and rear doors, and in the setup slides, we'll show you how those go on. So it's very easy to get access to the sample tray when you need to either remove or add samples. We'll show details of the shipping. It is a flat pack design designed for more convenient and inexpensive shipping. And as we go through the setup details, you'll see that the setup is quite easy and quick. So here's a picture of the ASX 560 type Autosampler in the ENC-DC. And you can see we've put some plugs in some of the ports. We've added a HEPA filter and fan, and then there's also an exhaust port in the upper right-hand corner. All of the ENC-DC enclosures will come with one standard exhaust port flange. That particular one you see in the upper right-hand corner is a 4-inch diameter, meaning 4 inches outer diameter for that exhaust flange, or about 10.5 centimeters. Another detail I'll point out is you see the Autosampler is sitting inside the enclosure. What's a little bit hard to see is on this enclosure there is a base plate, and that's if you have to put the enclosure and the system on an even surface. That allows of the entire unit fire, and as it comes standard, the enclosure does not have the base plate, and you would simply put the enclosure over the Autosampler if the surface was level. But if not, there is a base available, and we'll show details of that a little bit later. Okay. So for your reference, here are the dimensions and weight of the 3 enclosures. And this is a useful guide depending upon what Autosampler you have, whether it's a CETAC or another vendor system. This will give you a good guide to how well the setup that you have will fit into which enclosure. So is the ENC-280 DC appropriate, the 560, or something as large as the 860? So these are some good dimensions to have as reference. Okay. So some more details on the enclosures. As we mentioned the polycarbonate construction or the polycarbonate frame. The red plastic pieces are actually polyethylene plugs that can plug the ports, and thick nylon fittings are used as connectors to connect the various pieces of the enclosure together. As I mentioned, there is one 4-inch exhaust flange attachment that's included with all of the enclosures. The recommended ventilation rate, if you can connect this to a separate, about 12 to 15 cubic feet per minute. Optional accessories, and this is especially important if you don't have a ventilation fan readily available. There's a HEPA filter, and you can then connect that with a positive pressure fan. As I mentioned just on the previous slide, there's a base available for regular surfaces to place the enclosure on. And there are additional exhaust flange port diameters available. There are a total of 4. And again, the 4-inch one is standard, and then we'll look at details of the other 3 that are available for you. So the shipping of the enclosures, and this is probably the most common one, the ENC-560. We put this on a bench in the laboratory and placed it next to a 1-liter polypropylene bottle to give you some scale of the size of the box that the enclosure does come in. But as you can tell from the depth of the box, it is a flat. So It does not come already assembled, which would be a much larger dimension box. But we'll go through the setup, and you can see that it's quite easy to set the system to set the enclosure up. So again, for your reference, here are the shipping dimensions and weight. Have that. The depth, again, with the flat pack is only 18 centimeters or 7 inches. So doing it as a flat pack saves on shipping costs and certainly the overall bulk of the box that this has to be shipped in. Okay. So let's look at the setup of one of the enclosures. In this particular one, we did an ENC-280, which is the smallest of the three. So what we laid out here on the table are the individual parts that you would then remove from the shipping box. And it's a little bit hard to see because the materials are translucent, but you can see the side panels. In between the side panels, you can see the connecting posts. There are a number of connecting fittings or nylon screws, and you'll see those in a little bit more detail. And then on the far right, you can see the sliding doors. There are 2 of them, one for the front and one for the back. So first step is we'll set one of the side panel side, and then it's easiest to take 4 of the nylon screws and then connect the 4 posts to the one side. So that's the attachment of the support posts. You can't see the screws because they're underneath the panel, but when we put the other side panel on, you can see the screws at the top. So this only takes a minute or 2 to attach these. And again, you don't need any tools. These can be done finger tight. And then we put the other side panel on, and then you can see the white color of the nylon screw heads, and that's used to secure the posts. And there you have already the basic frame of the enclosure set up. So next step, we'll just set the enclosure shell upright. If you do require this, we went ahead and attached the standard exhaust flange. That's simply attached with a series of 6 screws to the side, and that's attached there at the top of the enclosure. Now, we'll first attach the back sliding door, and these simply slide over the grooves. They're a little bit hard to see because of the translucent nature, but once you have the parts in hand, you can see how it simply will slide up the groove and then up onto the enclosure. And then we'll turn on its side, and then you do the same type of operation, but you'll slide it above and then down for attaching the front sliding door. So we're just holding the rear part of that front door, and then we'll just let it slide down to the front. Then we turn it around. We left the front sliding door partway up, or then you can see you have very good access to the Autosampler tray. And then we did then set this on top of the optional base that you can acquire for any of the 3 enclosures, 280, the 560, or the 860. Otherwise, you would simply then place the enclosure without the base over whatever Autosampler you are using on the laboratory bench. And then finally, there are various plugs for the side ports. If a particular side port is not being used for, say, something like a fan or a HEPA filter, or you're not using it to bring in tubing or communication cables or power cords, you can simply close those off. The plugs are made of polyethylene. Okay. So these next tables are useful, and these are a general guide for the compatibility of the enclosures with various Autosampler types. And this chart, this table includes some of the legacy CETAC Autosamplers, such as the ASX 260 and 520. Again, for a smaller auto sampler like the 260 or 280, you would use the 280 DC. For the 520 and 560, the 560 DC. For the larger versions of the 868, the Accelerate, and the ASX 1400, 1600 that are used in oils, then you would want to move to a larger system like the 860. Now, there are additional auto sampler systems available from CETAC, and I do want to mention some of these. The ASX 560 can be equipped with a dilution module called the SimPrep. There is a microflow workstation called the MVX 7100 for small sample volumes. There is an online dilution version of the 560, the SDX. And you can also pair up any of the auto samplers with the ASX Express Plus, and this particular one is for aqueous samples. That is a rapid loading valve system for higher sample throughput. So these are other systems too that you can put in the enclosures. I'll mention one more that has recently been introduced to the market. That's the Oil 7400. And again, it has its own valve system, the ASX Express Oils for rapid sample throughput. And then we have a table here with some suggestions also of enclosure compatibility. And again, dilution and or valve modules can be placed outside the enclosure. They could be placed inside, but you might have to move up to a little bit large to the next size enclosure. But you could place the dilution module outside if needed, and then keep the samples protected inside the enclosure. Okay. So the part numbers for the ENC-DC series for your reference, ENC 990010 for the 560, 0011 for the 280, and 0012 for the 860. So what you saw on the previous slides will come standard. You'll have all of the pieces to assemble the enclosure. You'll have a variety of plugs to plug the ports. You'll have one 4-inch exhaust flange to attach, but you won't have a auto sampler base. And we'll next go through some of the optional accessories that you can acquire for these enclosures if they're needed. So I mentioned the auto sampler base. That's, of course, the enclosure can set directly on that, and your automation device would sit in the middle of the base. The part numbers for those bases are listed on the right side of the slide for your reference. So they're available again for the ENC 280, ENC 560, and the ENC 860. So those are all available. Okay. So I did mention the variety of exhaust flanges. The 4-inch diameter is again available as standard. There are 3 others, depending upon the exhaust requirements you have. There's 2.5-inch diameter, 3-inch diameter, and 3.5-inch diameter. Those are all available. The HEPA filters and adapter plates are also available. If you do need to have positive pressure through the enclosure via fan, you want to, of course, filter out the laboratory air before it comes through the enclosure to prevent sample contamination. And there are the part numbers for the filter and the adapter plate. And then the fan itself. So this is for use with a HEPA filter when a vent is not available. It'll provide a flow rate of around 120 cubic feet per minute, and they'll have to drive that through the HEPA filter. There are the part numbers listed below for North America, Europe, and Australia, and we recently do have one available for the UK. That part number will be coming soon, but it is available. So if you do need that, please let us know, and we can source that for you. But very soon we'll have a dedicated part number so UK customers can order the enclosure fan if needed. Okay. So I do want to mention another type of enclosure which is available for another series of autosamplers that CETAC does have. These are for the Carousel type autosamplers, the ASX 110 and 112. Okay. So these autosampler types actually have an integrated cover to prevent sample contamination. Again, they'll have a flowing rinse station as in the ASX 280/560 series, but these autosamplers are designed to handle lower volume samples that might be encountered in geology and semiconductors. And again, as in the ASX 280/560 series, a lot of things have been done to minimize trace element contamination and minimize exposure to any metallic components which might corrode. So here's a front view of the ASX 110. If you look inside the center part of the picture, you can see the circular or carousel sample tray. There is a front door that you can open in order to access the sample rack, but this has an integrated enclosure already that already is placed over and covers the sample tray. There is an analogous system which is stackable. That's called the ASX 112. It'll have the same type of carousel, but of course, since it's a different layout autosampler as far as the size is concerned, it'll have a different size integrated cover, but it'll also have a flowing rinse station and all of the other components selected to minimize contamination and corrosion. So again, since this is used often in geology and semiconductor, you can see the variety of sample vials and racks that are available, mainly for smaller sample volumes, but also the use of a fluoropolymer like PFA for more trace level work in both geology and semiconductors. And then I mentioned that the autosampler, the ASX 112, is stackable. This is often stacked on top of a desolvating nebulizer system we offer, the Aridus3 that's used in geology. But there you get a very good view of the front door and the latch that's now available that you can easily open and then access the samples in the carousel. Okay. So a little bit of close-up look. You can open up that front door, and there you see the different racks that are available for this type of autosampler. Now, in both pictures in the far left corner, you can see what looks like a port, and these will actually be sent with a plug. There is the option of attaching a vent to this autosampler, and there actually it is. There's the side vent port. There is one flange available. It's 2 inches or 5 centimeters in diameter if you do need to attach this to a vent. And there's the part number SP6876. There is no dedicated fan for this, but there is an available port if you do need to send this to your own exhaust to remove any fumes from inside the integrated enclosure. So, where to go for more information? There's a list of contact emails for the service team, sales. If you have technical questions, please email them to myself at fred.smith@teledyne.com or Paula Duscott at pauladuscott@teledyne.com. There's more information available, of course, on our website, and there's the link. And you can look over some more details and some more pictures of the enclosures and the autosamplers that they're compatible with. And again, an important reference in here is the dimensions of these enclosures. That'll give you a good idea, and the compatibility tables, which ones are appropriate for your autosampler, if it's a CETAC autosampler or another model. Which enclosure may be appropriate for your application. And again, if you have any questions, please email to the email address is listed. And that concludes the webinar for today. Thank you, everyone, for attending.